Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today I'm set this Yevamot daf Chavav. We are going to begin on Chavav Amud Aleph by the Mishnah at the top. V'kulam, in all the cases that we mentioned before, as Rashi explains, regarding the person who's the Chacham, who refused to be matter the neder, but maybe get the Shliach, who then has a desire to marry this woman afterwards, V'hameid B'isha, and the woman who receives testimony about her husband that he had died. In all those cases, says Rashi, L'hasiyam did not behen l'yichnois. We said that these people, because there are issues that it does not look good, we do not want them to marry her. However, on this, the Mishnah continues and says, Mutaros lihinasi lehem. So we said that v'kum shahoyu lehem nashim umesu mutaros lihinasi lehem. That if in all these situations, if they had wives at the time of this incident, they're not suspect. So if afterwards, after their wives died, they can marry. They can marry those people. Says Rashi, b'shas ma'isa umeisel achrizman. So one of their wife died afterwards. Mutaros elu hinasilahem. Then we allow these people to marry this woman. The hashtalekach shad, there's no reason to be suspect. Shari b'shah sheheid ba at the time when they gave over this testimony, or she'asu chacham, or when the chacham answered her, haisi ishto kayemes, they were married. Volisa azu nischavein. So presumably they did not have intentions in marrying this other woman. V'kulan. So when it comes to all these women, shenisu lacherim, if let's say she married someone else, as Rashi, lacherim kishe'asru chacham o kishe'ed eid b'misas bala umesu habalim hashniim. So that she ended up getting married, and then either Vinis Garshu, she got divorced, or Shnis Almanu, she became an Almana, Mitaris Lehinasahem. So again, we allow her to marry the Chacham, the Aid, the maybe get. It's interesting, it's written out of order, this Rashi. The top Rashi says Chacham, maybe get, mad. Okay. So regardless, because they got married, she got married, and then she maybe got divorced in the interim, or he died, we allow her to marry these people. The Kulam, again, and all these women, mutaris livnehem o lachehem. So if let's say we're dealing with this shliach or this chacham, so even though we said he's not allowed to marry her, but we're not going to extend that isser to their children. Mesu in. So he said, what happened? So this man was married at the time of the Maisa, and then his wife later on dies. Now, why does it give us that example? That's when we allow them to get married, which is mashman is garshulo. Not if they got divorced. As Rashi, the alidi shanasan es eina bezu shehiter girish es ishto. Maybe the reason why he divorced his wife is because of this woman that he freed up. So Amalei Rav Hillel or Rav Hashi v'osanya feel nisgarshu. We learned elsewhere that it's even if in fact she was divorced. So lokasha had havi katata had lo havi katata. It depends. Was there quarreling or was there no quarreling? Says Rashi. Had tani afil nisgarshu. Even when she got divorced, could go into havilu katata mikmei hachi. It was already known that they were on the outs. There was already fighting going on. The adain lo nasan daitu al zos. So in this situation where we matter even him to marry, even though she got divorced, is because it was katata. Fine. So that's how it's explained. And ha diktani nisgarshulo mid argil hu katata. It means he's just starting the fight now. To his skill l'haknit es ishto. So the fact that all of a sudden now he's starting to fight with his wife. There was no issues between him and his wife up until this point. It's probably because he's trying to now stir up the pot so that he'll eventually want her emotionally disconnected, so she'll want a divorce, he'll get divorced, and move on. V-Boy saying another possible answer is Havaha Doloi Havi Katata. Maybe in both situations, there's no katata, there's no quarreling in either situation. So then what's the difference? How come sometimes we say he can't marry her by divorce, and some say yes? Kasha. Had argil who had lo argila he, says Rashi. So says Rashi, Vaha diktanya filnis garshu bidargila he katata. It's all totally on who is the one who is initiating the argument. So in the event that she's the one that's engaging in the argument, so then we say, obviously it wasn't his idea about wanting to marry this other person, because she's the one that started it. And therefore that's when even by Gershon will say the din is that he could marry her. Or if he's the one that initiated the arguments, then we will not say that. So question 9. Kol elu shasun lisum nechshad shnasan enaba mahadin b'hoisel isha b'shas ma'isa v'girsha achakach. What happens if he divorced her afterwards? So this is how he says: Im hoisel hem katata koidem ma'isa. So he said, when is it an issue? If there was a katata, if there was already arguing before the ma'isa, that is one time. It doesn't really explain it, but that's one chiluk. And the argila he ata katata mutter. If she's the one that started the arguments, then it's mutter. Or if there was already quarreling before, then it is mutter for them after they get divorced that he can marry this woman. Okay. Weiter. V'kulam shehi nasu. So he thought misa Gershon. So we thought, what was this talking about? Misa to Misa, Gershon. Says Rashi, that she marries someone else, umesu, and then that person dies. Koinami or Reisha, the tiny. When it says in the Reisha that when this man dies, haragtiv, hargnuhu, that her husband died, etc. Loisas isha v'ktani de'im nises. If so, let's say she does marry, achar al pi, through this testimony, umeis hasheni, and the second one dies. So it says meis umeis. In that situation, hazem muteres linase le'ed zeh. So the one guy testifies that your husband died, and then afterwards, because of that testimony, she marries someone, and then that man dies. In that situation, that's when she can marry the original witness. V'alfa pi shemesu beis baleha. The chiddush is, even if, let's say, 2 of her husbands died already, tinasi l'shlishi, will still allow her to marry a third man. V'amrinan huchsakazu katlonis. We don't say that there is some type of a pattern that she has husbands that die, and therefore maybe we don't allow her to get married anymore. It says Rashi, the Karebi ha'omer betrays zimni havi chazaka. Even 2 times is a chazaka according to him. It says Rashi, as we're going to see later in Masechtas Yevamot, nises l'rishon umeis l'sheni umeis l'shlishi l'tenase. We don't want her to marry a third guy. So l'chayr, that's not like this situation, because we're saying the case of mace. The guy's testifying your husband died, and she went and married someone, and that man died. So the Gemara says, "Well, misa gershon v'gershon misa." It could be, again, he's testifying he died, but then she went and got married someone else, and then that man divorced her. So, but it's not necessarily a raya that she was married to 2 men that both died, because maybe in that case she would not be allowed to get remarried. The kul mutaris livnei malachayim. So maishna mahad nan. How is this different from what we learned? It says hanitan min ha'isha. Let's say there is this type of a rumor regarding a woman. Aser be'ima uvavita uvachaisa. So you're not allowed the mother, the daughter, the sister. So the question is, to look at Rashi, Aser be'ima vita vachaisa. Can the first time will come on, we'll see shemla acher shiyisa es ima. After, let's say, you marry this mother or the daughter, tiznezu imo uznus kama. So it's possible that she'll have mzana, and there'll be znus. So this is a problem. Uznus kama lo havi mitzer be'ima b'krovaseha. Okay, weiter. So The more answers like this: Nashe legabi nashe shechichan d'azlan. Woman to a woman, it is common. Gavri legabi gavri lo shechichan. But a man to a man is not shchiach. Inami nashe delay us. Fine. So what does that mean? So it's like this. Since all these women are around in this situation, you will maybe mazana. That was the whole concern. That because all these women around, there's a chance of znus. Or if the man is mazana with these women, the wife won't become usher. But if she is mazana, then her husband, she'll be usher to him. So he'll protest, so his wife will stay away from other men. So therefore, that's the idea. The gavri, so nashil gabi nash shechichan d'azlan. So it's a very good chance of znus. But gabi lo shechichan. It's not shchiach because the whole issue that if she's mazana, then all of a sudden she'll be usher to her husband. So the husband again is going to protest. So that's where the woman will stay away. And therefore, we don't have that concern. Inami nashidu asran shechivasan ahadadi o kapti hadadi. Gavri asran shechivasan ahadadi kapti hadadi. So when it comes to women, says Rashi, nashi lo asru. Women we didn't answer shechivas znus hakroiva es ishta gemura olav. This type of znus doesn't is not aser. Hilkach lo kapta ishto, we're not makbid with the wife of the shaska v'chayshinan of a gavri de aser shchivasan hadadi. But when it comes to a man, there is an iser hamzana asur labala, because if she has nus, as we said, she's asked her husband. So kapid bal v'rachik haimine. So he's going to distance from it. Okay, so that's the shchich hadadi will kapti anash. So again, inami nashi doli asran shechivasan hadadi lo kapti hadadi. Gavri the asran shechivasan hadadi kapti hadadi. So again, that's the basic distinctions we said. Yehachi aviv nami lo maboy kamer lo maboy aviv dibuz divziz b'nei minei. So when it comes to this father, which a person, says Rashi, will be boishu mi aviv via muscle of, he's afraid of his father. B'noi deloy buzz is aviv minei, this father's not afraid of him. Imalo kamash malan. Hanulach ketzad eishas achiv. Hanulach ketzad eishas achiv. Hanulach ketzad eishas achiv. Next parak of Arba Achen. So you have 4 brothers: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Now Shnayim mehem, Shimon and Levi, Nesuim shtei achayos. They were married to 2 sisters. So each one, Shimon was married to Rachel, Levi was married to Leah. Umeso Nesuim es achayos. So Shimon and Levi died. Now you have left 2 sisters who are zakuk, and there's 2 brothers. There's Reuven and Yehuda that could do yibum or chalitza. So in this, the Mishnah says, Har'elu choltzos lo misyevamos. We only want them to do chalitza. We do not want them to do yibum. V'im kadmu v'kent, because there's an issue of achasaku kasai, that, as we're going to see. V'im kadmu v'kansu. Let's say Reuven does yibum. Yoitziu. We want him to leave, not to stay. And we're going to see that one of the issues is because if what happens, let's say he marries Rachel. Now Leah still has to have Yibum or Chalitza done. So obviously Reuven can't do it. So okay, it's fine. There's another brother. Yehuda will do it. What happens if Yehuda dies? So if Yehuda dies, then Reuven Lamafrei will have answered her to him, and she'll not be able to have Yibum or Chalitza done to her because it's Achos Ishto. It's his wife's sister, because it's his wife's sister, so therefore he's not able to marry her. So that's the reason why we don't want Yibum to be done, because there's a chance that this other brother will die before he does Chalitza. Rabbi Lezer Omer Beishami Omer Mikayim Beisil Omer Yoitziu. So actually it's a machlok, because Beishamai says if this happens, they could stay married. And Beis Hillel says no. Now Rashi says, what's the reason why you can't do Yibum? Mishum Zika. The kivan detervayu zekikan lahai. Rachel and Leah are both zokek to Reuven and to Yehud at this point. The miyavim, if you do Yibum, pagab achos ukukasa the haviki ishto. So there, since this woman has a zika, both of them have a zika too. So if you do Yibum to one, so then you there's an issue because it's the haviki ishto. This other one's like your wife. It's achos. It's you're taking almost like taking two sisters, because they're almost like both quasi-married to you. So that's why we don't want it to be done. That's one shot, as we'll see in the Gemara. Fine. Or maybe I'd see you. Achas mehen asura al echad iser ereva. So let's say Reuven was, so yeah, again, the same situation. Shimon and Levi died. You have Rachel and Leah, but Reuven was the father of Rachel. So obviously, as we've learned in the first parak, Reuven cannot do Yibum with his daughter, but also, and this is not a case of Saras Ereva, because Rachel and Leah were not married to the same husbands. But again, Reuven can't marry, obviously, one of them. Now, Yehuda technically can marry either one of them. He's not related. So, Asr Ba, he's obviously Asr to his daughter, Mutter Ba'chosa. But he could marry, Reuven could marry the other one, even though they're sisters. It doesn't make any difference. To think about how that's exactly happening. He's they're sisters, they're half sisters, but not from him. Okay. Anyway, the point is that he may be an Ereva somehow. Maybe a daughter is not the best example, but regardless, let's say it's his mother-in-law, whatever it is. So in that situation, he can't marry her, but there's no reason why he can't marry Levi's wife, because she's not an Ereva. And it's not, they're not Sarah, because it's not the same husband. Vasheni Yehuda also b'shtein. As we said, he's not allowed to do Yibum with both of them because of Achasukukaso. Assuming there's Yesh Zika, so he has this connection to both of them, because he technically would do Yibum with both of them. Obviously he can't, so he'll end up doing Chalitza with both of them. Now let's say you have an Isser Mitzvah, Isser Kedusha, which we mentioned is like an Isser D'Rabbanan. So Chaletzes Lo Mesyavemes. So we don't allow Yibum, because there's like an Isser Lav. We don't want you to be Osik in this mitzvah, because you're also doing an Avera. So therefore we do Chalitza. Hoisa Achas Mehen Asur Al Zeh Isser Ereva. Let's say one of the sisters, again, Reuven has some type of Isser Ereva to one of the sisters. Vashniya Surah Al Zeh. And the other sister is an Ereva to the other. So Reuven is an Ereva to Rachel, and Yehuda is an Ereva to Leah. So he's saying, Vashniya Surah Al Zeh. So Isser Ereva, So Asur Zeh Muteres L'Zeh, Asur Zeh Muteres L'Zeh. So again, obviously, they cannot marry or do Yibum or Chalitza. They don't do Yibum or Chalitza to their Ereva, but they could do this for the other one, because, again, it's not a Tzara, because they're coming from two different men, Shimon and Levi. They were married to different husbands. So that's not considered to be Tzaras Ereva. V'zuhi she'amru, and this is what we said, a Chosa, her sister, Kishihi Yevimto o Chaletzes o Mesyavemes, that the other guy can actually do Yibum if he wants. So Shema Mino Yesh Zika. What you see from our case, again, there's a concept of Yesh Zika. The I Ein Zika, if let's say the connection of the Shemer Shalom is not so strong, Michli, let's see, Hani Mitrei Bati Ka'asin, they're coming from two different houses. Shimon died, Levi had also died. So those are two different houses. Rachel and Leah are single wives that they were married to separate men. So the question is, Haili Yavim Chada v'Haili Yavim Chada. So let each of them just do Yibum. What's the problem? Why can't Reuven do Yibum and Yehuda do Yibum? It must be because Yesh Zika, and therefore there's a Zika of both of those women to Reuven, and there's a Zika for both of those women to Yehuda. Obviously, they're not going to do Yibum with Reuven. Can't do Yibum to both, and Yehuda doing Yibum to both. So we have no choice. We have to do Chalitza. They both have to do Chalitza. Gemara says, well, maybe there's no zika. There's no zika. Let them just do yibum. As we say, mishum ksavar asur levato mitzvahs yavmin. The problem is dilma adibiyavim chad. What happens if when Reuven does yibum mais idoch, right? Yehuda, the third brother dies. So if the third brother dies before doing chalitza, now only the brother alive is left, and he can't do anything since it's achos ishto. And therefore that's the reason why. It's not because of a raya of yesh zika, maybe not. Yahachi tlosanami. So why don't we say also when it comes to three brothers? Let's say there was three brothers. So loma boy comer. Loma boy tlasa davadi botam Yevamot. Obviously, if there's three brothers and two of them died, there's only one left. If he would do yibum on one of them, obviously he's being mevatel mitzvahs Yevamot because he 100% Yehud. There is no Yehuda. There's no guy. There's only three brothers and two of them died. So Reuven, two of these women are zokuk to him. So if that's the case, if you would say, even if you hold Ein Zika, you're certainly being mevatel mitzvahs Yevamot because by doing yibum with one, the other one you can't do chalitza with because it's your wife's sister. But when it comes to four, you would think maybe it's not a big deal. We're not going to be chayshu. Yehuda's going to die right away. Yehuda's going to do chalitza. Maybe he'll die in a few years. The answer is we are chayish in that case enough that we don't want them to simply want Reuven to do yibum. So Yihachi, as we continue Vabum Beis, if that's the case, l'chayra, we should say the same thing over by Chamisha Nami. Lamisa the Treli. So the man says Lamisa the Treli Chashina. So let's say you had Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. So again, same situation. Shimon and Levi were married to Rachel and Leah. Shimon and Levi died. So Reuven, in that case, we say it's fine. He can marry one of them. What happens if Yehuda dies and Yisachar dies before either one of them is able to do chalitza with the other sister? So don't worry about that. That's not something which we're concerned of. We're not going to assume that two of them are going to die. Okay. Fine. So let's look at question 10. Arba achim, shnai mehen nesuin beis achoyos, umesu hanesuin es achoyos. Ma hadin b'chamisha achim, shnai mehen. What's the din by 5? So he says, Laman dermed that time misham diyesh zika. So the one who says there's an issue of yesh, very, very interesting way of saying this. I wasn't thinking it this way. If you hold that there's a zika, l'char wouldn't make any difference, right? Who adin l'chamisha achim. There's still you still wouldn't be able to do yibum. Reuven would not be able to do yibum even if there's 20 brothers because there's a zika on him to both women. That the other one's going to die before we come about the Mrs. Yevamot. The tray. So very interesting. In that case, we would not be chayish. Question TB11. Arba achid. You have 4 brothers. Shnai mehem nesuin beis achoyos, 2 married 2 sisters. Umesu hanesuin es achoyos. Mehem hatamim she'enu misyavamos. What are the reasons why you cannot do yibum? So we said there's 2 answers. Either because of yesh zika. This is TB11. Either because you hold yesh zika, or because of isser lovatel mitzvahs Yevamot. Okay. TA. Where's TA? Here's this. TA9. Arba achim shnaim nesun shnei achoyos. Madu asur l'syavim. Mamash, the exact same question. Let's see how he writes it. TA9. O mishum yesh zika, o mishum bittul mitzvahs Yevamot, in parentheses v'gazrinan, adam yavim chad mayis edoch. TA9. Okay. All right. TA9. Same question. Weiter. Okay. So now the Gemara says as follows. Omer Rava bar Rav Huna, Omer Rav. Sholosh achoyos. Let's say you have 3 sisters. Yevamos, and they're all Yevamos. So their husbands all died. And so you have 3 women, and they're all related. Shenaf lifnei shnei achiv. And they fell to two achin, 2 brothers. So you have, again, Reuven Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar. Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda died. They all were married to 3 different sisters. Now you have these 3 women, and you have Reuven, and you have Yisachar, and you have these 3 women who are all sisters. So what is the din? So Lifnei Shnei Achin Yevamot, Zeh Choylitz L'Achas, Zeh Choylitz L'Achas. So one does chalitza to one, and this one does chalitza Zeh Choylitz L'Achas, and this other one does chalitza to the others. The Emsoyis, and the middle one, Sricha Chalitza Mishneim. She'll need chalitza from both of them. So basically, we're going to have to go through these Rashis. So let's look at Rashi. So he says as follows. Kolim lefnei shnei achi balehen shehen yevamehen. Emsoyis kolim shlishis v'lav davka naka. It doesn't mean the middle one, not the middle sister. It just means the third one. Okay. So again, so you have 3 women. So one guy does chalitza to one of them. One does chalitza to the other, to one of them. And apparently both brothers do not have to do chalitza to Rachel. Just as long as Reuven does chalitza to Rachel, she's completely free. So if Yisachar would do chalitza to Leah, she's completely free. However, the third sister, then that's not enough. She needs chalitza from both Reuven and Yisachar. So it's interesting. So the din is that on certain times the chalitza is very strong, and sometimes the chalitza is weak. And we can understand that the third chalitza, that's being the third sister, it's a weaker chalitza, because since chalitza was already done with one of the sisters, she's now achos chalitzasai. She is the sister of the woman that you did chalitza with, and therefore you don't have such a strong zika to her, and therefore you can do chalitza, but it's a weak chalitza. However, the other brother who did not do chalitza, he did chalitza to one sister. So again, he also has a weak chalitza. So a weak chalitza is not enough to be able to remove her completely, and therefore every brother will have to do chalitza. However, the first one was okay because he could have done chalitza with anyone. So therefore he did a chalitza, and it was a strong chalitza to remove her completely. Okay, which is the din. In a normal situation, if you have 20 brothers and a woman is a shemeres yavam, we don't require all 20 of them to do chalitza. Just one person, one brother can do either yibum or chalitza, and that's it. And that will free her, because that's a strong chalitza to release her. But over here, the third woman, it's not strong enough to release her. Okay, so again, for the we'll explain this a little bit more when we say a couple more lines. So Omrule Rabba Midka'amrit Emsoyis Sricha Chalitza Mishnehen. The fact that you said that this third sister, I should say, both Reuven and Yisachar have to do chalitza, must be kasavrit. You hold yesh zika, that there is a strong connection that she has with both of the men. Vahavila chalitza psula, and therefore she's considered like a chalitza psula. The chalitza psula sarach lachzor al kol achen. And when it comes to a chalitza psula, a weak chalitza, so you need all the brothers to be able to release her. So again, for the third woman, since chalitza was already done to her other 2 sisters, so this chalitza is not in place of yibum, since you can't do yibum anymore, since she's achos kasai, right? So again, whenever you do chalitza, it's strong because it releases her from having to do of the yibum. But you can't do yibum with her anyway because you already did chalitza with her sister. So because of that, since she's achos was a kukasai, so she was the woman who, the sister of a woman you were zakuk to, and you didn't release her with chalitza. So you need this weak chalitza, which we're calling a chalitza psula, to release her, to be able to. All the brothers need to do this. If that's the case, for the Gemara kamaisanami. Well, we should require all the brothers, in this case Reuven and Yisachar, to do, both of them to do chalitza for both of these first women too, for Rachel and Leah, right? Because why? Because you can't do yibum to the first 2 sisters either, as it's still it's still a deficient chalitza. Because again, you can't do yibum. How could you do yibum if you have to marry? You have 2 other sisters who to deal with. The verse is like this. To eat enough b'vas. Let's say all three brothers, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, they all died at the same time, which means that they were all zokek at the exact same moment. Hachinami. Then you're right. If in that situation, there's a problem because you would never be able to do yibum with any of those three sisters because they all became widows at the same moment. So you're right. In that situation, Yutaka would be required to have to do chalitza. Each brother would have to do chalitza for each woman. We're talking about a situation not where all three men died at the same time, but Shimon died, then Levi died, then Yehuda died, which means that the moment that Shimon died, his wife Rachel, you could have Reuven or Yisachar could have done Yibum, and if they decided to do Chalitza, that's a strong Chalitza, and that is the reason why she's completely released. And therefore, that's the reason why the first one, and the second one, because Yisachar does the Chalitza for the other one, and Reuven did the Chalitza for the first one, so that's why the third one now is a problem, but the first two is not an issue because it was Bezuach Hazu. Nafal Chada. So let's say again, Rachel becomes a Shemesh Yavam Sochal to Reuven. So Reuven does a full, complete Chalitza. Then afterwards, Nafal Idach. Then all of a sudden, the next husband died later on. So now Chalitza Shimon. So it says Shimon, but I use the example Yisachar. Nafal Idach. Now all of a sudden, the third sister dies. Her husband dies. So Chalitza Hai Mafkazikasai. Chalitz Hai Lahai Mafkazikasai. So basically what happens is each one needs to do a chalitza to remove her. Yomi Rav ein zika, but understand, why is Rav requiring this? He holds ein zika. So it's not so strong, so this all shouldn't be required. You're right, this is only, he's saying this, lafi the shita of yesh zika, this is what's required. But according to Rav, maybe you're right. According to him, maybe he does not require. How do we see he holds ein zika? So Rashi says, reminding us on Daf Yud Zayin, Omer Rav Huna, Omer Rav, Shomeres Yavam, Shemesa, Mutter Be'ima. He said that if you have a woman who is zokuk to you, she's a Shomeres Yavam, but you didn't do Yibum or Chalitza, but she dies first, so in that situation, you're allowed to marry her mother. Why? If this person is, let's say, your wife, just outright your wife, you can't, after your wife dies, you can't marry her mother. You're never allowed to marry your mother-in-law. But in this situation, ein zika, because it's not really like your wife. She died before you did anything, before you did Yibum or Chalitza. So that's a right that Rav holds ein zika. But even though he holds ein zika, nonetheless he's explaining according to this shita. So again, if it's bezuach or zu, then taka, each brother only has to do Chalitza, one Chalitza, and then finally when the third sister comes around, or the third husband dying later, then both Reuven and Yisachar have to do chalitza for both of them because it's a weak chalitza. However, if it was bavas achas, if they all died at the same time, the three brothers died at the same moment, then it's true that Reuven and Yisachar would have to do chalitza for each of them. They would have to do, Reuven would have to do chalitza for three of the sisters, and Yisachar would have to do chalitza for three of the sisters. Ad Kan.